Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Egypt is one of the oldest civilizations in human history, carrying mysteries and secrets that continue to fascinate scholars, historians, and Egyptologists. In biblical texts, the Egyptians are frequently mentioned and are also cited in ancient Jewish writings such as the Bible and the Torah. According to these texts, the Egyptians are believed to be descendants of Ham. In this video, we will explore Egypt before the era of the pharaohs. Don't forget to like and share. MIZRAIM, Egypt before the pharaohs. Ancient Egypt was one of the most iconic civilizations in history, located in northeastern Africa along the fertile lower course of the Nile River, where modern Egypt stands today. This society emerged from prehistoric Egypt and solidified around 3100 BCE, according to conventional chronology, with the political unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the reign of Narmer, often identified with Menes. The history of ancient Egypt unfolds through a succession of stable kingdoms, interspersed with periods of instability known as intermediate periods. These kingdoms are divided into three major phases: the Old Kingdom, Early Bronze Age, the Middle Kingdom, Middle Bronze Age, and the New Kingdom, Late Bronze Age. Each phase brought significant advancements in political, religious, and cultural organization, marked by major architectural achievements like the pyramids and temples, as well as a complex system of spiritual beliefs. The language spoken by the ancient Egyptians was Ancient Egyptian, also known as Ran Kemet. This language belongs to the Afroasiatic family, specifically to the Hamato-Semitic group, and is closely related to Berber or Tamazight languages. Hieroglyphic writing, one of the most fascinating Egyptian innovations, was essential for preserving their history and culture. The Egyptian language has one of the longest recorded histories, used in writing from 3200 BCE until the Middle Ages, and continuing as a spoken language for a long time. The ancient Egyptian script, famous for its hieroglyphs, dates back to 3000 BCE and was composed of hundreds of symbols. According to ancient Jewish, Christian, and even Islamic texts, before the pharaohs and mythical kings of Egypt, the common ancestor of the Egyptian people was known as MIZRAIM, son of Ham. In biblical texts, Egypt is referred to as the land of Ham. Interestingly, the name Kemet in ancient Egyptian means dark or black, reflecting a distinctive characteristic of this civilization. In ancient Egyptian art, dating back over 4,000 years, an interesting contrast between the Egyptians and other peoples can be observed. The ancient Egyptians are depicted with a brownish skin tone, indicating that the original population of Egypt had this characteristic. According to biblical tradition, they were descendants of Ham. Over the centuries, Egypt experienced various waves of migration from foreign peoples, such as the Hyksos, Semites, Canaanites, and the Mitanni of Aryan origin, contributing to an increasing ethnic diversity. In addition to these external influences, the Egyptians also maintained a strong relationship with the Nubians, who were genetically similar, both being descendants of Ham. While the Nubians, descendants of Cush, exhibited darker skin, the Egyptians, descendants of MIZRAIM, had a lighter skin tone in comparison. According to biblical texts, Cush and MIZRAIM were brothers, sons of Ham, which explained the physical resemblance between the two civilizations. This proximity is evident in artistic representations. Egyptians and Cushites, Nubians, shared similar physical traits, although the Nubians, originating from Nubia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and adjacent regions, were slightly darker. This interaction between different peoples and ethnicities throughout history shaped the rich cultural tapestry of ancient Egypt, a civilization influenced by its African origins and by the foreign peoples who crossed its path. Miscegenation in ancient Egypt was extremely intense, resulting in the blending of the native population with various foreign peoples who, over the millennia, migrated to Egyptian territory. This blend is visible both in the arts and in the ethnic composition of the population throughout history. The arrival of groups such as the Hyksos, Semites, Canaanites, Nubians, and Mitanni contributed to a diverse society with varied cultural and genetic influences. Linguistically, the name MIZRAIM reveals much about Egypt's identity and its connections with neighboring peoples. MIZRAIM is a Hebrew cognate derived from a common Semitic root, often used to describe Egypt. In various Semitic languages, such as Arabic, the term Misr, or Mir in modern Arabic, is widely used to refer to the country. In the Amarna letters, dating to the 14th century BCE, the term Hamarim, MIZRAIM, appears in diplomatic correspondence in Akkadian, reflecting the Hebrew form, MIZRAIM, which also derives from the root MSR, referring to Egypt in many texts from the Middle East. The Semitic root MSR, present in languages such as Ugaritic and Biblical Hebrew, reveals the long tradition of interaction between Egypt and the Semitic peoples of the region. In Neo-Babylonian and Assyrian Akkadian texts, Egypt is mentioned as Muzar, highlighting its significance in the political, commercial, and military relations of the Near East. The presence of this term in historical and diplomatic documents from the Babylonian and Assyrian empires reinforces the central role Egypt played as a major power, continually engaged in alliances and conflicts with other powerful civilizations of the time. This name, traversing linguistic and cultural boundaries, illustrates Egypt's unique position in the ancient world, a nation with a strong African identity but deeply connected to the Near East through linguistic, diplomatic, and commercial interactions. According to biblical accounts in Genesis chapter 10, MIZRAIM, son of Ham, was the younger brother of Cush and the older brother of Put. Together, these families formed the Hamitic branch of Noah's descendants. MIZRAIM had several sons, including Ludim, Anamim, Libim, Naphtuim, Pathrusim, Kaslam, and Caphtorim, making him the direct ancestor of the Egyptian people. In the book of Exodus, Egypt is referred to as the house of bondage, emphasizing its role in the oppression of the Israelites. During Passover, Moses urges the Israelites to remember the day they were freed from Egypt, stating, "Remember this day in which you went out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten." This event is central to the identity of the people of Israel, symbolizing liberation from oppression and the renewal of the covenant with God. In the book of Deuteronomy, the Israelites are instructed not to abhor the Egyptians, as they were once foreigners in their land, a reminder of the hospitality they received during their time in Egypt, even though they were later enslaved. Medieval Islamic historians claim that the pyramids were built by wicked races before the flood, but it was MIZRAIM, a descendant of Noah, who took over the region after this event. There are also interpretations suggesting that Ham was the first to settle in the area corresponding to modern Egypt, and his descendants, through MIZRAIM, were responsible for building more monuments and consolidating Egyptian civilization. However, there are disagreements among historians about the exact period of the pyramids' construction. Some argue that they were built before the flood, while others maintain that their construction occurred after this biblical event. This debate remains open and is a topic that could certainly be explored further at another time. In the book of Genesis, Abraham, his wife Sarah, and his nephew Lot were living in the land of Canaan when a severe famine struck the region. Seeking sustenance, they traveled to Egypt. Upon arrival, Abraham, fearing for his life due to Sarah's beauty, asked her to present herself as his sister rather than his wife. The Pharaoh, impressed by Sarah's beauty, took her into his harem, unaware that she was married. In exchange, Pharaoh gave Abraham valuable gifts, including livestock and servants, among whom was Hagar, who would later become Abraham's concubine and the mother of his firstborn, Ishmael. Later in the same book, we encounter the story of Joseph, Abraham and Sarah's great-grandson, the 11th son of Jacob and the first with Rachel, his second wife. Jacob loved Joseph more than his other children, which caused envy and resentment among his brothers. Driven by jealousy, they sold Joseph into slavery to a group of Ishmaelite traders, who took him to Egypt, where he was bought by Potiphar, an Egyptian official. In Egypt, Joseph gained Potiphar's trust and rose in prominence. He eventually married Asenath, an Egyptian woman, and had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. This story marks Joseph's transition from a slave to one of Egypt's most powerful figures, playing a crucial role in the survival of his own family and Egypt during the coming years of famine. In the biblical texts, we find several notable Egyptians, some mentioned by name and others only generically referred to as pharaohs. In the books of Genesis and Exodus, pharaohs are not identified by their names, but through the study of biblical and Egyptian chronology, it is possible to determine which pharaohs might have been contemporaneous with figures like Abraham, Joseph, and Moses. For example, there is the pharaoh who interacted with Abraham when he arrived in Egypt due to the famine in Canaan, as well as the pharaoh who elevated Joseph to a prominent position after interpreting his dreams and saving Egypt from famine. There's also the pharaoh of Moses' time, who resisted the requests for the Israelites' liberation and was eventually subjected to divine plagues. Among the notable Egyptians in the biblical texts, besides the pharaohs, are characters like Asenath, Joseph's wife and mother of Manasseh and Ephraim, Hagar, Sarah's servant and mother of Ishmael, and the pharaoh's daughter who married King Solomon. Potiphar, the Egyptian official who bought Joseph as a slave, and his wife also play important roles in the narrative. Another significant Egyptian is Potiphar, the priest of On and father of Asenath, who becomes the grandfather of Joseph's children. One of the few pharaohs named in the Bible is Shishak, Sisak, mentioned in 1 Kings as having invaded Jerusalem during the reign of Rehoboam, Solomon's son. In ancient Egypt, governance and economy were centralized under the pharaoh's authority, who was considered the absolute ruler of the country. He theoretically had total control over the land and its resources. Besides being the supreme military leader, the pharaoh was also the head of government, supported by a vast bureaucracy to manage the kingdom's affairs. Below him, the vizier acted as the pharaoh's right-hand man, overseeing administrative functions such as land measurement, treasury management, construction projects, the legal system, and record-keeping. Egypt was divided into up to 42 regions known as nomoi, each governed by a nomarch who reported directly to the vizier. Temples played a crucial role in the economy, functioning not only as religious centers but also managing the collection and storage of the kingdom's wealth. They operated granaries and treasuries, with supervisors redistributing grains and other goods as needed. Ancient Egypt reached the height of its power during the New Kingdom, extending its control over much of Nubia and a significant portion of the Levant. However, after this period of glory, Egypt entered a gradual decline. Throughout its history, the country was invaded and conquered by various foreign powers, including the Hyksos, who were of Semitic and Canaanite origin, the Nubians, Assyrians, Achaemenid Persians, and later, the Macedonians under Alexander the Great. After Alexander's death, Egypt was ruled by the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty until 30 BC, when it fell into the hands of Cleopatra. It's worth noting that Cleopatra, although famous as an Egyptian queen, had Macedonian ancestry and was not of Egyptian origin. Over time, Egypt, with its already diverse population due to the influence of various peoples, was conquered by the Arab Caliphate in 640 AD. If you're interested in ancient Egypt, let me know if you'd like a video about the theories regarding the construction of the pyramids. If this is a topic of interest, I'll bring it to you soon. May God bless you all, and I'll see you soon.